Hey, this video is the third in a series of my interviews with Dr. P.M.H. Atwater, and I want to say that it was just a thrill and a joy to meet her and to have conversations with her. And I thought we got to become friends over the course of the three interviews. Before we get started, I also want to give a shout out to my angel Lilia, and I call her my angel because I believe that she was sent to help me. And she's been helping me quite a bit in terms of making connections. She connected me with Dr. Atwater and with Reverend Bill McDonald. So I wanted to actually acknowledge her publicly and thank her for her support. So with that, this is Dr. P.M.H. Atwater and the Forever Angels. Hi, everybody. This is Brian Smith, your host of Grief to Growth, and I am back today with Dr. P.M.H. Atwater for part 3 of our series that we're doing. We talked a couple of weeks ago about her film. We actually went over her biography, her Better Fascinating Life, and we talked about her film, As You Die, Know That You Live Forever. And then last week, we talked about Dying to Know You, the proof of God in the near-death experience. So if you haven't checked those out, definitely check those out. And just to let you know who Dr. Atwater is, if you haven't seen the other ones, she had 3 near-death experiences in 1977, started researching near-death experience in 1978. She's interviewed approximately 5,000 men, women, and children over the years. She's written about 18 or 19 books. So she is one of the leading experts as far as the near-death experience goes, not only having had 3, but having talked to so many thousands of people who have had them. And today we're here to talk about her latest book, and I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it. It's called The Forever Angels, The Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact. And this is about children who have had near-death experiences. So I want to welcome you back, Dr. Atwater.
Well, it's absolutely fun to be here.
Yeah, it's been really great getting to know you. And as I was saying, in the intro, if you didn't see the other interviews, go back and check those out. I know a lot of people ask about your near-death experiences. We covered those a little bit in the first interview, but Dr. Atwater's book, I Died 3 Times in 1977, does go into detail about her near-death experiences. So if you want to know more detail, check those out. But today we're going to talk about the Forever Angels. And is this the only study that's been done like this with children and kind of a lifelong experience of the near-death experience?
No, there's a number of other books
Mm-hmm.
that have been written about childhood near-death experiences. None of them, however, have ever focused on the ages of birth to the age of 5 and done in death. None of them have really gone deeply into the after effects. Absolutely none of them on planet Earth has gone to when these people age, as they get older and older, especially in the later years, looking back, what kind of impact did that near-death experience at such a young age have on their life?
Right.
So the Forever Angels stands alone. There's absolutely nothing else like it.
Yeah, that's what my thought was. I know that people have looked at how children's near-death experiences differ from adults' near-death experiences, but I haven't seen anybody talk about like the lifelong impact and the differences of those, because a big part of the near-death experience, which we touched on last time we were together, is the after effect. I mean, people talk about the experience itself, but it's the lessons from the experience and how it impacts the rest of your life, because people don't come back unchanged from these.
Well, that's certainly true. And the research that has been done so far really focused on out of the mouth of babes. You know, these stories are so innocent and so out there. Kids talking about God, or kids talking about grandma and granddad that they saw on the other side. They tell incredible stories. Many of them talk a lot about their present relatives, mom and dad, maybe grandma and granddad who are still alive. One little girl who was in an accident in Richmond, Virginia, talked about her grandfather drinking all the time, and she didn't like that. And he didn't even know she knew. Nobody knew that she knew. So she got into areas of her grandfather's life that were absolutely secret They've never, ever been mentioned even around her.
Wow.
And she knew them in detail. So these, and children often, Brian, if they've been injured, running a high fever, they're in a hospital, especially if they're, a big automobile accident where their parents were killed, while they're in the hospital, they will see their parents floating around the ceiling. And they will talk to their parents. Or maybe their parents will come to their bedside and talk to them. And it sort of freaks out the nurses and the doctors because, of course, they can't see them.
Wow.
But the children can. And this is just typical, really. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about it. It is so typical that most hospital and nurses and doctors either know about it, have read about it, or are really kind of reluctant to say it happened on their watch, but yet they admit that it did. So children really have this vision that they can see through things. They can see past what you and I can see, and they'll talk about things that are near and dear to our heart. I mean, life after death. They just come right out with it. Of course you live after death. They have no problem at all with that kind of issue like we do. And so naturally, we're so thrilled when they talk about this. It's like, wow, little innocents talking about this. But nobody does the follow through. Nobody goes back to these kids 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 or 40 years later, and say, how is it with you now? And that's what I did. My first study that was done in the 80s and 90s, that was pretty much kind of the typical, I'd say kind of, because I was certainly looking for after effects, but I was dealing then with kindergartners up to people in their 20s and 30s who had an experience as a child. In that study, I said birth to the age of 15, but I didn't get hardly any teenagers or tweens that talked about their experience. Most of them were from the age of 7 younger. And then I had 2 large groups from birth to the age of 15 months and from 3 to 5 years of age. So in that book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences, I talked a lot about what I found. Then, and I found some things that really surprised me and startled me, even kind of disturbed me. So I was going around trying to interest some kind of doctor or MD to take up the cause and do the same kind of study I did. And I couldn't interest a single soul. So finally, 3 years ago, I decided, that's it. I'm going to do it again. Only this time, I'm going to go out with the same birth to the age of 5 years. Only I'm going to go for the more mature bunch. Those people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who could verify having had a near-death experience from birth to the age of 5. And I asked them this one question. Did having a near-death experience at such a young age have any effect on your life? If it did, tell me about it. So in essence, I was asking for essays. And then I went back with telephone calls and emails to check on this, that, and the other. But Brian, how can I say this to you? This older bunch looking back, the first bunch was the young ones looking forward. Now I've got the older ones looking backward. So I'm able to view the near-death experience from both sides because I took, the first study and blended it in with this one. Um, I this one man who was in his late 60s, he had just retired from his job. He wrote me almost a book, it's almost 50 pages. And it was interspersed with photographs from his family. And he had never been able to tell a single soul anything.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden he could talk. I almost had to shut him up. I mean, I'm sorry, but he went on and on and on, month after month after month. And some people were so thrilled to be asked this question.
Yeah.
That their reply, their essays were so tear-stained, I could hardly read them. I mean, it's like I opened a door nobody had ever opened before, and the people just rushed through. I had one woman who made it very plain: no researchers have anything to do with people in poverty. Yeah, they're not going after people who are in poverty or letting us know you want our stories too. And this woman saved every penny she could to save enough money that she could buy stamps to mail me her story, her essay.
Yeah.
And I was just so taken by that. It's like, wow, we're not going after everybody. Right. We're only going after people in the hospital or people who take these computer generated questions, that enable people to get their Ph.D. because they do their research on the computer. That does a lot of good, yes, but it doesn't give you the real story. It doesn't get you in with the people. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
I've always done. And boy, did I ever get replies. I mean, wow.
How did you find the people in the study? How did you?
Well, sometimes I put out ads.
Okay.
Sometimes I put notices out on the internet. Sometimes I put out notices. Sometimes I passed out flyers at various talks I gave, just pass it out, people in the audience.
Wow. Okay.
I did everything I could think of. Sometimes word of mouth, getting other people to, help you. I just, for 3 years, I did everything I could to get a hold of people. And, once you put something out on the internet, it just goes on and on and on. Yeah. I'm still getting people who want to participate in this study. And that study was closed a year ago. So it's like, whoa.
Yeah. So the book is fascinating, and your research, as always, is very thorough, and you cover a huge cross section. So what are some of the differences between the effects of a near-death experience on a child and on an adult?
It's the same pattern of experiences. It's the same basic after effects, physiological and psychological. But with children, how do I say this? It is much more different. Different in the sense of intensity, different in the sense of how they deal with it, which is very much radically different than adults do. And especially when you get these teeny tiny ones, there's no before.
Yeah.
An adult can give you before. Adult can give you contrast. An adult can give you opinion and tell all kinds of stories about their life, and their children and their mates, and how this affected their work, and how this affected their lives. But a child, especially a little bitty one, let's say it's someone at the age of 2
Mm-hmm.
who had a near-death experience. They just look at you cross-eyed. They've never left where they were.
Yeah.
They're still there, Brian. And for them, the biggest challenge is to figure out how to be a human being.
Yeah.
They don't understand relationships. They don't understand mom and dad and siblings and friends. They don't understand school. They're still over there, and it takes them a while to sort of drift down into the earth world and realize that things are different here.
Yeah.
And we look at things very differently. So, for the average adult experiencer, it takes 7 to 10 years to integrate the experience. And don't believe anybody who said they did it quicker.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen a lot of them that, they've gone through various kind of studies or workshops, or did whatever they could to be able to get a hold of what happened to them, and the way their lives are different now, and what that means, and who they are, and my goodness, what's going on here. But with children, it takes 20 to 40 years to integrate their experience.
Wow.
An adult will integrate, a child compensates.
Yeah, you said that. Could you explain the difference between integration and compensation?
A child will do everything they can to obey their parents,
Mm-hmm.
or to be a part of the system, or to get along with their friends, and to avoid bullying. A lot of these kids get bullied tremendously. So they're trying to figure out what they have to do to match the life around them and the people around them, and what's demanded of them. So they're spending all of their time compensating, doing everything they can to fit the system. They don't think about where they were. Well, often they do, but not in that sense, because they know where they were, but it just doesn't fit here.
Yeah.
And so in order to, be a part of the family, and in order to be part of, brother and sister, have friends, go to school, they have to have some way of matching, or some way of disguising themselves, or some way of modeling what's going on with other people, so that they can kind of fit in. Because if they talk about what they what's really inside of them, what they're really seeing and feeling, it turns others off. Case in point, when they get up to the dating age, let's say tweens and teens, I've had ever so many of them say, why bother? I mean, I know what's going to happen if I go out on a date with this guy. I can tell you exactly what's going to happen, so why bother? And so they don't go out on the date.
Wow.
So many of these kids have future memory. I mean, they can see ahead, certainly for maybe sequences of time, and yeah, they know what mom's going to say. They know what dad's response is going to be.
Wow.
They know what the teacher's going to say. So they're sitting there in their chairs, say, their arms over their, solar plexus, and saying, why bother?
Wow. It's interesting because we come into this world, and I guess we don't have that memory. We just kind of try to fit in, right? But it seems like there's something about the near-death experience, just having that memory and knowing who you are, that makes it hard to fit in here. Would you say that's true?
Yes and no. For children, yes. For an adult, maybe no.
Okay.
Because for an adult, um, these other worlds and other planes and other dimensions begin to open up.
Mm,
And they get very thrilled, frightened at first, maybe confused at first. Maybe they don't know how to handle it. Most of them don't.
mm,
Um, how do how do you go on living your life when you've been in an accident, you nearly died, you're in the emergency van headed toward the hospital, and suddenly you're leaving your body, you're seeing what all is going on, then you're on top of the van as it's speeding toward the hospital, and you're there as a spectator.
mm.
You're enjoying the view. It's like, wow, I didn't know I could do this. This is incredible. Wow. So for an adult, it's like Merry Christmas. It's like, woo, I could do things I never thought I could ever do before. And when you come back into your body, it's like you want to tell everybody, and it's like right away there's this wall.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear you. They don't want to hear you at all. Let me give you a case in point with adults. This is a young woman, probably, maybe 29, 30. And she's driving in her car out in the countryside, that is to say, fields, farmland. And she's scooting along on a road, and a truck comes, hits her on the left, smashes into her, killed on sight. They were able to call the EMT crews and what have you. They rushed her body anyway to the hospital, thinking maybe they can save her, and indeed they did. She's on the operating table. She finally came to on the operating table, and she was just alive, absolutely alive, thrilled. She said, I saw my dad. I saw my dad. And he told me all about his death. And that it was okay for him to die because it was his time. He had to go on, but I have to come back. And it's not my time. I have to stay here. I have things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just so vocal that was interfering with surgery. And the doctors were having a fit. So finally, one of the doctors went to the waiting room where the family had then gathered, and talked about what was happening. And the people in the waiting room said, that's a hallucination. They just talked to the dad that morning. There's nothing wrong with his health.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the doctor goes back, explains this to the woman on the table. She becomes even more animated. Absolutely, they couldn't handle her.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back again to the family and said, get that dad on the phone right now. I want him to talk to her. Well, suffice it to say, they called, found out that the dad had died 5 minutes before the daughter did, in exactly the same way he told her he had died, in the same manner that he told her.
No.
What do you do with that? Wow. That is not a hallucination.
Right. Exactly.
That's absolute proof.
Yes.
So this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a particular phenomenon that affects a person not only at the heart level, your brain, all parts of you. Suddenly you're faced with a part of life that you had no knowledge of, that you were not even willing to have any knowledge of, that you think is a bunch of hokum, that that how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
So the reverse is true with children. They've already been there. They know about that. Their big challenge is, how do I be an earth person?
Yeah.
How do I be a human being? How do I match what's going on in school? How do I date boys and girls? How do I grow up?
Yeah, the thing that struck me about the book as we think about near-death experiences, and again, some of us who haven't had them, we think they're really pleasant, and many times they are. But these kids have a lot of struggles fitting into society. They come back with physiological effects, as you said. They tend to be brighter, smarter. They tend to have different views. They're more compassionate. So they don't quite fit in, and that causes struggles for them, right?
It causes questions.
Okay.
Some of them are more challenged
Mm-hmm.
than others. Some of them are kind of clever. They find ways of fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are traumatized. Some of them think that it's all a big joke, and they're going to figure out how it works. It's different, certainly, with different children. Some of them use this situation to really make their life larger and bigger and more exciting, and to them, this is a reality, the other side, that is just as real as this side. So their challenge is, how do you deal with that? And like I said, it takes decades. It's no flip of the switch. It takes a while.
Yeah.
Some of them are able to handle it quicker than others, but most of them, it takes a while.
Yeah. And there are a few things in the book that I thought were really fascinating. There people have actually pre-birth memories, and people that remember their births after.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the book is dedicated to a woman who had her near-death experience in her mother's womb.
Yeah, that's crazy.
As she was being born,
mm-hmm.
while her mother was attempting suicide.
Oh, wow.
All three.
Wow.
Do you think this little gal was a little mixed up?
Yeah.
She took all of her childhood and young adulthood to sort of figure it out, her place in this world. And she finally decided that her place in this world was to help her mother. And to help her other relatives, and do what she could to help other people. You find this with adults, but you find it even more with children. They come back very empathic, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to heal and help others. They want to do what they can to help others. And believe it or not, so many of them get into science. They get into various types of the business world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just amazed. Your adult experiencers usually head for the ministry, or they become healers, or become psychics, or they become mediums, or they become teachers, or they develop different types of work, often start their own businesses where they are able to assist others, sometimes in a big way, sometimes the indigent people, whatever. They are often very active in the healing arts. Many of them take to the stage and do a lot of talking and sharing in that manner. And you have a few children that do that, but not that many. Your child experiencers are really interested in finding out what the world ticks, what the world is all about. How do I define this? What do I do with this? How can I make a big difference in the world, or even a little difference that will make a big difference? So we get one of them, this fellow in Sweden, I believe it was, had a near-death experience as part of his tonsillectomy. Had a lot of that. The tonsillectomies, often they use too much ether or whatever, and children have near-death experiences as part of tonsillectomies. Certainly those that were done in the 1940s through the 1970s, because they were using far too much ether. So we have a lot of those kind of cases. And in his near-death experiences, he was shown how to make things and how to do things. He was shown the way business works, or the way he can make a difference in people's lives through nature. And he was shown in detail, and he was smart enough to know not to talk about it, to instead go to school, get his PhD, and then when he got his PhD, he could take what he learned in his near-death experience, and he could use that. So he did. He found a different and better way of making pulp from trees to make paper. He has a number of copyrights, if you will, from the technical way of making pulp from paper, or making paper from pulp.
Yeah.
A number of science. There's just so many of them who get involved in science or in business in some way. One of them got involved with buying and selling homes, became a millionaire, and did everything she could to help other people, especially in hospitals, and especially who might have had a near-death experience. And there were a number of them who became millionaires, even though they had a tough time. Well, let me give you an example of tough time.
Okay.
90% of them, we're talking 397 people. So this is a major study. 90% of them could not bond with their parents.
Wow.
Could not bond with their parents. That doesn't mean they didn't love them. They just didn't bond with them. They really could not understand the mother-daughter, father-daughter relationship, or son. They couldn't understand those relationships, because as far as they were concerned, they still were part of this other world.
Yeah, that reminds me when I interviewed Ingrid Hankala. She had an experience when she was like 2 or 3, and she came back and she was just like telling her parents, "You're not my mother. You don't need to call me Ingrid. That's not my name." She just had this. And so I think it caused a separation between her and her parents, who were like, "You're just a little kid." But she remembered who she really was.
This is true. And I know Ingrid, by the way. And she's one of the people that I've talked to a lot. She's a perfect example. And many of them go through periods of suicide ideation. They want to go back. They just want to go back. Some of them try suicide. Most of them don't, because they don't want to do that. But still, that suicide ideation. There's a whole chapter in the book on PTSD versus NDEs, because many times they can go through similar challenges. But the one thing we all need to remember To a child, suicide is not harmful.
Hmm.
It's not bad.
Yeah, could you say that again, please?
Suicide is not harmful. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
For the average child experiencer, when they were not breathing, they were in this beautiful world, this perfect world with loving people. Now that they're no longer there, now that they are breathing again, that world is gone. A child's logic says, aha, the way to get back to that perfect world is to stop my breathing.
Yeah.
So they try to do that, not realizing or knowing that that could cause a lot of grief or problems with their parents
Yeah.
and with the siblings.
Yeah.
They don't think that way. And I think it behooves us to sort of step back and realize that they view the world differently than we do. And for them, suicide is not wrong.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to understand that and to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very helpful. It would help all of us if we kind of wake up to realize that a child thinks different.
Yes.
So if we could gear our psychology, our languaging to this different reality, we could then help them to be able to get excited about the earth world. In my book, the first one I wrote on child experiences, the new children and near-death experience, in the back is an appendices, a resource section that is very, very large. And I give you lots of things you can do to help that child be more aware and comfortable with wearing a body and the life that they have now, and not grieve so much for the life that they left.
Yeah.
So I really call everybody to get that book.
Yeah.
And to to try out some of those exercises, because they make a huge difference. And one of the biggest that I would very much recommend to anyone who has a child who had a near-death experience, invite that child to make their book. Make your book. Get a lot of paper, maybe have make holes in the paper top left-hand corner, maybe yarn or a ribbon. And in that book, the various pages, their book, it has to have a cover. So the child names their book. It's by them. And then inside, they talk about their story and any poems, any thoughts they have, any drawings that they have. If what happened to them made the paper, then put the clipping of that newspaper in the book too. And leave pages in the back, empty pages, that they can go back and add more to their book. You will find, as I have, that any child who makes their book, and I would recommend adults also, make your book. It has such a healing effect. It has such a joyful effect. It has such a it is just so wonderful. It's like their book. Only the experiencer can validate your experience. There isn't anybody else who can. Only you can.
Right.
So make your book. It's the most healing thing you can possibly do.
Yeah. As I was reading the book and as we were having this conversation, these kids go through things. Have you heard of indigo children? We talk about some children that are very sensitive, that seem to be connected to the other world. So I see similarity between kids that have near-death experience and some of these children that we're calling, indigo children now. And I have two daughters. One of my daughters is passed over. But I remember when they were about 3 years apart, so they're about 4 and 7, something around that age. They talked about being together before they came here.
Yeah.
They said,
Okay, let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
These are the new kids. The human race is evolving. It really is. These are the new kids. We've got all these names, all these labels: indigo kids, crystal kids, cosmic kids, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Take all of those labels and bat them out the door. Throw them out the door. Don't mean a thing. Then take all those characteristics those labels supposedly described, bunch them together, and you have the new kids.
Yeah.
I wrote a book about it. It's called Children of the Fifth World.
Okay.
Because the human race is evolving. These are the new kids that are coming in. If you stick with labels, then you're inviting your children to be exclusive.
Yeah.
They're not exclusive. They're inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So just kick all those labels out the door and realize these are the new kids. The human race is changing. It's evolving, and the way they are changing matches what happens to children who have near-death experiences.
Yeah.
So you're very correct.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, I picked up on as I was reading the book. I'm like, I just see a lot of kids that haven't had near-death experiences that we know of anyway. Because I'm like thinking, are these kids having near-death experiences we don't know about? Because it seems like so many of them are having similar things to kids who have had them.
We haven't yet looked at the real changes that are happening to children who have near-death experiences at such a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
When we do that, let me search for some percentages here. I think those percentages would be very helpful. Mm-hmm. 93% are drawn to math, science, and history. 84% mind works differently than anybody else. Significant impact, enhancement of intellect. Let's look at this. Birth to kids under the age of 7, certainly under the age of 6, when they're old enough to take the standard IQ test, they're scoring 150 to 160. 48% of them are scoring 150 to 160. That's average near-death experience.
Wow.
But those younger, 81% are making that score. Birth to 15 months, especially if they had a black light experience instead of a bright light experience, when they're old enough to take the standard IQ test, they're scoring 180 and above.
Wow.
All of them.
Wow.
All of them. At least in my research.
Wow.
I want to find some more. Pardon me for reaching out of.
That's fine.
Because this is so important. Well, certainly vivid dreams, 70%, problem sleeping, 67%, out-of-body experiences, 62%, aware of the future, 61%, strong spiritual guidance and knowing, 76%, a very successful career, 74%, yet at the same time, 74% suicide prone. So we've got a lot of conflict here. Highly intelligent, 75%. I mean, these kids are smart.
Yeah, yeah.
They're incredibly smart. And many of them come back with synesthesia. Many of them come back abstracting by the first grade. Let me give you an example of abstracting, because most people don't understand that.
Yeah.
This is a 7-year-old actually he's a 6-year-old in the state of Georgia, a little bit north of Atlanta. He drowned about halfway through the school year, had a near-death experience. When he could come back to school, what are they reading, Brian, in the first grade? C Spot Run.
Yeah, we were reading C Spot.
And Jane, right?
Yeah.
He comes back reading Greek mythology and understands it. Yeah. Goes up to his teacher and says, "Why was the book Robinson Crusoe ever written?" Well, the teacher freaked out. I mean, pulled him out of class, and for gifted learners. This is what we find again and again and again. Let's talk about synesthesia. Synesthesia comes from the limbic system in the brain. The limbic system in the brain is our emotional center, the center of our senses. So they're coming back with blended or multiple senses. Again, let me give you an example. This time of myself, I was born this way. No, I wasn't a near-death kid. I was just born this way. I was born with synesthesia. So I was the only child in the first grade who could smell color, see music, and hear numbers.
Wow.
Now, I was telling the truth. But the principal, my teacher, thought I was lying. She couldn't stop me from doing it. She had me sit on a tall stool in front of the class, wearing a tall conical head that said "dunce" on it, as an example of a bad child who told lies. My mother was called in twice by the principal because they wanted to kick me out of school. By the end of the first grade, I knew I was telling the truth. I wasn't lying to anybody. I was telling the truth.
Right.
So at the end of the first grade, I decided that every adult was crazy, and that from now on, I was not going to listen to adults anymore. I was going to do my own thinking. I was going to prove my own world, and I was going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you kind of recognize that? I'm still kind of that way.
That's exactly what you've done. I was just thinking, it's interesting because you talk about soul planning and someone that came in to do what they were going to do. You're the perfect example of that, right?
Well, look, I did my first double-blind study with a control group at the age of 5. I mean, nobody's going to tell me. I'm going to be out there finding out for myself, and I'm going to see it from all angles. But suffice it to say, this is what children often deal with. And there's a wonderful drawing in the book of this child who was able to dance in the air with numbers, and that's how she got addition, subtraction, division. She danced with numbers in the air. Again, this is synesthesia. And so I'm looking at the near-death experience. Okay. Birth to the age of 5. An in-depth study of just that span of time. Certainly from birth to the age of 2 or 3, maybe less with 4 and 5, maybe not. That's the major time, Brian, when all of the patterning is being laid in the brain
Yeah.
for brain use, the nervous system, the digestive system, and skin sensitivity. All of that is being laid in the brain. My thought is these little kids are being hit with the power punch of a near-death experience, and yes, it is a power punch. And it's hitting out at the time when that major patterning is being laid in the brain. It's flipping these kids into higher ways of seeing and viewing and thinking.
Yeah, they're like turbocharged.
Right. They come back turbocharged. Indeed so. And my goal now, my desire now, is to reach out to the neurologists and the medical people and the scientific people and say, research this. Something is happening in the brain that it's flipping it. We need to know more about the physiology of that and what's really happening, because it happens to so many. We're talking thousands and thousands of people here, maybe millions.
Yeah, it's interesting that it seems like the standard or the mainstream science and medicine is still rejecting the idea of a near-death experience with so much evidence, because you talk that a lot of people might not realize there are physiological changes that these kids go through. There are lifelong changes, which you've documented with the study. So I just wonder how long mainstream science is going to be able to deny the reality of the phenomenon.
It's going to take voices, certainly my voice, your voice, everybody's voice, saying, "Wake up here! Yoo-hoo! We've got something that's very valid. We can prove that it's valid. We've got a lot of numbers here. We've got what happens from that. We've got the IQ tests. We've got the testimony from the parents, from the teachers, from the siblings. We've got it now. So let's use it. Let's use this data to interest people. And I'm just going to keep yelling.
Oh, yeah, well, you're doing a great job.
Everybody, get the book, The Forever Angels. Get out there. Here's the information.
I think if people, if they bother to do the research or read your research, it's like I said, it's undeniable. Some of the stories these kids tell. There's one little girl, I guess she was walking around the house looking for her brothers, and one had never been born because he was a miscarriage, and the other one hadn't been born yet, but she saw
them all.
Right.
There they were every night and every morning at the end of her bed, her two brothers. She talked with them. She knew them. They knew her. She didn't know until she was older that the one had died when he was very young. She didn't know that. And eventually she came to know the one who was later born.
Yeah.
And it's like she grew up knowing both her brothers.
Yeah. Which really makes you wonder about the nature of time, right? I mean, she's seeing backwards and forwards at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, they perhaps, we human beings forget, or maybe never knew, that the various planes and dimensions of life, of existence, interplay. We think that life is a one-way road. Birth, die, one way. You do all that you can in that trip, but that's all there is. No way. We can slip in and out of this reality all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Those on the other side can come to greet us. We can go to greet them. We can see them often. They can see us. We can have this back and forth dialogue. There's this wonderful book called Hello from Heaven. And it's filled with stories from widowers and widows about their dialogue and their seeing and being a part of their deceased relatives' life afterward.
Wow.
And it's a big study. It's a huge study. So get a hold of the book Hello from Heaven. You know, it's very often those who have died will come back. They'll come back in your dreams many times. They'll come back through various other symbols or signs. Sometimes they physically manifest.
Mm-hmm.
There's this bleed through or this walk through that's occurring all the time, and we don't see it. We're not aware of it until we're confronted by it.
Yeah.
And we think it's a psychic phenomena. We think it's scary. We think it's, oh, how do I handle this? This is a ghost. No, it's part of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life has many, many dimensions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like I said, the book, I think, well, you're fascinating. First of all, it's been such a pleasure to have these.
You're just like rascals.
It's just really great to sit down and talk to you. And I mean, you're obviously a brilliant person. You're so full of joy. People have been telling me they've been looking at the videos and just commenting how full of joy you are. Yeah, let's talk about this. That's Busy Betty Wiggles.
Yeah. Hey, folks. Yes, I wrote the book, The Forever Angels.
Mm-hmm.
What are parents going to be able to do to then speak to their child in a way that helps the child remember? You don't have to have a near-death experience. Kids can remember their birth.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be surprised at how many can remember conception.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are there when mom and dad conceived them. I mean, I've got lots of stories about that. So these kids, many of them remember.
Yeah.
So I dreamed up this series of books called Animal Lights. There are 6 of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of animal stories. This one is about Busy Betty Wiggles.
Mm-hmm.
And these are animals that remember conception, remember being in the womb, and they talk about being in the womb. They talk about maybe accidents that can happen in the womb. They talk about birth. They talk about handicaps, all kinds of issues related to birth and conception. And so the parent then can read these stories with the child, and maybe by then the child can read them his or herself.
Yeah.
And help the child to remember, okay, did anything like that happen to you?
Yeah.
Were you a Busy Betty Wiggles?
Wow.
Do you remember being in the womb? What was it like for you in mommy's pocket place? I call the womb the pocket place. What was it like for you in the pocket place? So this is the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's out by the end of October. It's an ebook. These are all ebooks. And again, there'll be a total of 6 in the Animal Lights series of various animals. They're $3 a piece, $18 for the full set. They're ebooks. Anybody in the world can get them. Mm-hmm. Finally, parents are going to have something that they can sit down with their kids and laugh and giggle and say, Do you remember any of this?
Yeah, that's a good point. As I mentioned earlier, my daughters, they were just talking one day and they said they remember, being in heaven, as they put it, before they came and choosing us as parents. And it was totally spontaneous. We had no idea where it came from. We had never talked to them about anything like that.
Yeah, so finally, parents are going to have
Yeah,
a specific type of children's books to help the children remember.
that's awesome. You have to let me know when those are available so we can mention
Well,
them.
one of them should be available at the end of October, which is next week.
Yeah, coming up really
And
soon.
it'll be on Amazon.com. It's an ebook, and
Okay,
it's called Busy Betty Wiggles.
that sounds great. Well, I want to encourage everybody to get the book, The Forever Angels. It's fantastic, and I've read now. This is the second book of yours I've read, and I'm reading. I just got a manual for human development, and just started that.
Oh, the manual for developing human.
For developing human. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the big one. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important book I've ever written.
Well, I just started a couple days ago, and it's fascinating. So,
Have fun.
yeah, I want to say again, thank you so much for doing this series with me. It's been a true pleasure and honor, getting to meet you and get to know you and learn about your work and just see your joy
You
coming through the
too.
screen.
Yeah, you too, Brian. You become like a good friend.
Yeah. So I want to tell everybody again, if you want to know anything more about Dr. Atwater, it's pmhatwater.com, and PMH is her name.
Well, www.atwater.com.
Yes.
Get on my website. Don't you just write me. Get on my website.
Yes.
www.pmhatwater.com. I produce a free monthly newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, it's only for the curious.
Yeah.
If you're not curious, you may not like it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just, like I said, so much fun to be with you again today, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
See you later. Hey, thanks for watching. Before you leave, I'd like to just remind you, you can always find me at www.grief2growth.com. That's grief2growth.com. And you can schedule a free half-hour consultation if you'd like. Also, before you leave, please click on the like button here, click on subscribe, and click on the bell. By clicking like, YouTube will show the video to more people, and by subscribing and clicking the bell, you'll be notified when I release new material. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.